After 8 long years on federal death row, the final chapter closed for one of the most shocking crimes ever to strike a U.S. military base. At sunrise, inside the Terre Haute Federal Penitentiary, a decorated Army Ranger, once hailed as a war hero, was strapped to a gurney and executed for the abduction and murder of a 19-year-old private who had barely begun her military career. But before we get to his final breath, we need to go back to where it all started, back to the man he once was, the young woman whose future was stolen, and the crime that shook the nation. This is the case of Louis Jones Jr. and the murder of TRACY Joy McBride. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Born in 1950 in Beaumont, Texas, Louis Jones Jr. grew up in a time when military service was seen as one of the most honorable paths for a young man. He took that path seriously. Enlisting in the U.S. Army, he quickly proved himself. He wasn't just another recruit, he was tough, disciplined, and sharp. Over the years, he climbed the ranks, serving with distinction in the Army Rangers, one of the most elite units in the military. Jones fought in the 1983 invasion of Grenada, an operation that tested the physical and mental limits of every soldier involved. Later, during the 1991 Gulf War, he deployed to the Middle East, where he endured grueling combat conditions. He earned medals, commendations, and the respect of his peers. By the time he retired in 1993 as a master sergeant, he had over 20 years of service behind him. On paper, he was a success story, a man who had done everything right, a veteran who could have lived out his life as a respected member of his community. But underneath, something darker was brewing. After retirement, Jones stayed connected to military life, taking a job as a bus driver on base. Outwardly, he was stable, a father to his daughter, Barbara, and a decorated veteran with a secure job. But his personal life told a different story. Jones had been married 3 times, and none of the marriages lasted. His final marriage to Sandra Lane, a staff sergeant, was on the verge of falling apart. Sandra later described him as a man transformed by the Gulf War, emotionally unstable, restless, and unpredictable. She recalled sudden mood swings, violent outbursts, and behavior that suggested he was haunted by memories he couldn't escape. In early 1995, Sandra went to military authorities with a terrifying complaint. Jones had assaulted her, forced her to withdraw money, and sexually violated her inside his home. An investigation was launched, but before it could run its course, Jones escalated to an act of violence that no one could have predicted. TRACY Joy McBride was just 19 years old. Born and raised in Minnesota, she was a bright, determined young woman who dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved music, had a warm personality, and was known for her constant smile. Joining the Army wasn't just a career move, it was her way to pay for college while serving her country. After graduating from Centennial High School, she entered training at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, before being assigned to Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas. TRACY had only been on base for 10 days when her life was stolen. She had plans, she had ambition, and she had people who loved her deeply. She was dating a U.S. Marine, and her future was wide open. But on February 18, 1995, she crossed paths with the wrong man at the wrong time. That afternoon, TRACY was in the base laundry facility, folding her clothes and talking on the phone with her family. It was a routine, ordinary moment, something every soldier had done countless times. But for Louis Jones Jr., who had driven onto the base that day, it was an opportunity. Just 2 days earlier, he had violently taken Sandra Lane against her will. Now, he was looking for another victim. He approached Tracy and in an instant, two soldiers nearby noticed the struggle and tried to intervene. One of them, Private Michael Peacock, was struck so hard by Jones that he was knocked unconscious. The other soldier, unarmed and powerless, could only watch as Jones forced Tracy into his vehicle and sped away. The abduction happened in broad daylight, on a secure base, yet no one could stop him. Back at his home, Jones committed acts of cruelty designed to erase evidence. He locked Tracy in a closet, forced her to bathe in hydrogen peroxide, and even made her walk only on towels. He meticulously washed her clothes and meticulously controlled every detail. But his obsession with erasing evidence could not erase the suffering he inflicted. Hours later, he drove Tracy north of San Angelo to a lonely bridge along U.S. Route 277. There, armed with a tire iron, he delivered at least 9 devastating blows to her head. The medical examiner later testified that her injuries were worse than what he typically saw in fatal car accidents. He left her beneath the bridge, her body broken, her uniform still on, but her dignity stripped away. When Tracy was reported missing, the response was immediate. Military police, FBI agents, and local law enforcement launched a massive search. A missing soldier from the base was a serious matter, one that couldn't be ignored. For nearly 2 weeks, they found nothing. But on March 1, 1995, Jones was arrested, not for Tracy's disappearance, but for the assault on Sandra Lane. During interrogation, investigators noticed inconsistencies in his story. When pressed harder, Jones finally broke. He confessed, telling them where they could find Tracy's body. At the desolate bridge north of San Angelo, investigators discovered her remains. The cold February weather had preserved her body, confirming the brutal details Jones had tried so hard to hide. Because Tracy had been abducted from a military base, the case became a federal matter. In October 1995, Jones was tried in federal court in Lubbock, Texas. The charge, kidnapping within a special maritime and territorial jurisdiction, resulting in death. Tanya K. Pierce, the lead federal prosecutor, laid out every chilling detail. Tracy's family attended, demanding justice for their daughter. Jones's defense did not deny his guilt. Instead, they argued that he suffered from Gulf War syndrome, neurological and psychological damage caused by exposure during the war. Experts testified that the war had changed him, that he was no longer the same man who once served honorably. But the jury saw it differently. After only 65 minutes of deliberation, they found him guilty. At sentencing, they cited multiple aggravating factors: the cruelty of the crime, the torture inflicted, and Tracy's vulnerability due to her age. On November 3, 1995, Jones was sentenced to death. Jones was transferred to federal death row in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he spent the next 8 years. During this time, he filed appeals, citing his military service and mental health as reasons his life should be spared. His daughter Barbara stood by him, visiting and writing letters. But for Tracy's family, appeals only prolonged their pain. No court decision could undo what he had done. On March 18, 2003, Jones's final day arrived. He declined a lavish last meal, choosing only a simple plate of fruit. He spent time with his daughter before being escorted to the execution chamber. At 7 a.m., strapped to the gurney, for lines visible in his arms, he was asked for his final words. He recited Psalm 118, then sang the hymn, Jesus, keep me near the cross. His last words were whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." At 7:08 a.m., Louis Jones Jr. was pronounced dead at the age of 52. In a written statement, Jones accepted responsibility. But Tracy's mother, Irene, rejected the idea that war trauma excused his actions. The Gulf War is never an excuse to take somebody's life. Today was justice for Tracy. Tracy was laid to rest with full military honors at Fort Snelling National Cemetery in Minnesota. Her family created the TRACY Joy MCBRIDE Scholarship Fund, ensuring that her name lived on through others who would achieve the dreams she never had the chance to pursue. The execution of Louis Jones Jr. was only the third federal execution since 2001, reopening debates about the death penalty, the psychological impact of war, and accountability. But for Tracy's loved ones, one truth remained. A promising life had been stolen, and justice, though delayed, had finally been served.